Hello and welcome to a new episode of That Fertile Feeling, the podcast. My name is Françoise and I'm here today with Helen Zee, who again I found on Instagram as most of my guests. Hello, Helen, welcome on the show.
Hello, Francoise. I am so delighted that you reached out and we're getting to have this conversation here today with your listeners. So
Mm.
thank you.
And you're a fertility and intimacy and a menstrual health practitioner, so very relevant for the show. You're based in Australia, and I have to ask you, I'm getting so many great guests from Australia. What's going on in Australia? It feels like you have this big enlightened field going on. Do you recognize that?
Yeah, I do. I've been born and bred here, and as I learnt through this path of conscious connection and community over the last 11 years or so, there's a remarkable amount of people and gifted people in this part of the world that is willing to share. And equally, I'm getting to meet wonderful people just like yourself.
Mm. And so you work as a fertility, intimacy, and menstrual health practitioner. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how did you become one?
How did I become? Uh, I have got so I've got a Bachelor of Science, and I used to work in pharmaceuticals as a manager for quite a few years, but I was always interested in natural health. For me, the bridging of allopathic health and natural medicine is they're synergistic. And so earlier on in my career, I became a fitness professional and also opened up my own boutique gym in the local area.
Mm.
And I had Monash IVF contact me wanting to do a pilot study for women for 6 months on lifestyle factors, predominantly fitness. And we were doing some meditation as well. And I was asked to head that and with utter delight. And so I would turn the boardroom into a mini fitness studio, and we would do testing for the women as well
Mm.
in that 6 month period. And we had about a 70% success rate,
Mm.
and 90% of women improved their ovarian function in some fertility marker. And that was purely by introducing fitness, mindfulness. And that was the beginning of my career that I wanted to stem more so in the fertility arena and eventually let go of the pharmaceutical career that I was in. And I went on to study yoga meditation. But something quite magical happened while I was running that pilot program. I introduced the males and the partners into the program. Now, we're talking about 15 to 17 years ago, where IVF predominantly worldwide was more heteronormative. It's
Mm.
not, it didn't have the same amount of availability that it does now for mothers going in and accessing IVF and assisted therapies for themselves.
Mm.
Um, so we brought in the males, and while we were doing the program and doing the fitness program, I got to experience something very, very palatable. There were certain couples that were, even when I was getting them to do the exercises, they were looking at each other. So, look at what we're doing, look at what we're doing, look at what we're trying to do. And there was this enormous love and goodwill that was pouring out. And there was also the opposite to that. There were couples that were vacant, that were just about grey looking, really hardly anything there. They'd lost a lot of luster, a lot of light, and it was like going through the motions. And even when there were pregnancy losses or an IVF treatment didn't work out for that particular round, there wasn't support in that partnership. And that kept me curious. And I wanted to know, what else could I do? How else could I bridge this gap? What is here? I wanted conscious parenting, and conscious parenting starts with conscious relationships, and it starts with the relationship with yourself. And so that was my intrigue that brought me into the, what do I need to do? Is it psychology? No, it's not psychology. Is it just relationship counseling, holistic counseling? No, it's not. And then when I opened myself up to Tantra, it ticked all those boxes, because I'm allowed to do hands-on work with people. I'm allowed to do trauma response work, people that have had difficult upbringings or past relationships that have carried over, that may be a stumbling block in why they're not conceiving. So there's the emotional blocks, the mental blocks, there's the physical blocks. And so that ticking my boxes meant that I started studying that. And then I also introduced that in my repertoire for my clients. Yeah.
I feel that's a really strong image or picture that you paint there of the couples who are still connected and have that aliveness between them, and then the more vacant looking couples. And it's sometimes it's hard for me. Like, one of the things I love to stress when I work with women who are having trouble conceiving is you need to find back that vibrancy within yourself, that aliveness. And it can be like in the connection with your partner, or just allowing yourself to do things again that are fun, because the fertility journey can really suck all of that out of you.
Yeah.
And it's such difficult advice to give at the same time, like someone who's struggling, to tell them that, okay, just I had a client the other day, we discussed how she needed to go ride roller coasters again because that's what really made her feel alive. And yet I said, but that's the energy you want to bring with you into conception, right? It's that openness to life and that vibrancy. So I love how you paint that image of that you could really see that difference between some couples and others. How do you see that coming back into conception?
So very similar to yourself, I guide my clients and couples into, let's get back into that honeymoon effect, or the pleasure dome. And by that I mean that tingling, that excitement, that when we first start on a journey, everything's fine. We're not doubting our body's ability. We're not doubting that we're going to have an obstacle. And so that's the essence of trying to get back into that sense of state and being. And very similar to you saying to the woman that you were talking to about going on a roller coaster, there's a practice that I do with my clients, and it's called about getting into the pleasure dome. And so if I could even ask our listeners today, what brings you pleasure? Let's make it non-sexual, but what brings you pleasure? Is it a pistachio ice cream on a hot summer's day? Is it going and chasing a sunset? Is it sitting under your favorite blanket with a warm cup of tea and curled up? Like, what brings that buzz and that gooey feeling in your body? And I invite people to think of at least three things. And when you've thought of those three things, then I ask people, when was the last time you did any of those things? And so when it's like, oh, I don't know, or I don't remember, then what I suggest is pop a pleasure alarm in your phone. Just so, sure, it might be winter. You may not have your favorite ice cream, but what else can you do that's pleasurable? Even if it is exploring the landscape of your mouth, like the mouth is connected quite viscerally to our pelvic floor, our sex organs. So even just coming into something that's quite palatable through the taste of the mouth, through a sensory experience. I mean, we're here as spiritual beings in our body having a sensory experience. Sensuality is living out our duality through our senses. This is what comes up for me, and this is what I try to teach my clients as well is like, can we be more palatable through our senses? Um, that's just one way that
Mm,
I try and get people having more of an embodied experience of themselves, as well as the process that they're going through.
mm.
Mm,
And I feel in the end, it all comes down to this nervous system again, right? These are the things that help you come back home in the present, in your body, in the now. And that's what's really needed to signal to your brain that you're safe. And then with
mm.
that, that it's also safe to conceive. Get out of that permanent sort of fight or flight that can come with fertility or with fertility issues.
Yeah, yeah.
And so
Mm,
I invited you on the show because you have this tantric background as well. So you just mentioned your work is actually much broader than just the tantric work. But I thought
mm.
it would be really good to talk to someone about intimacy issues, the relationship with the body, and finding
Yeah.
your way back to that safe and maybe sensual relationship with your body, especially because it's such an important gateway to release and being in the moment. So can you tell us a little bit about what Tantra is?
Mm.
A very broad question, but just
It's a broad question, but we've got to start somewhere, right? We've got to start somewhere. And then I invite the listeners to search for themselves what their definition is. Because we can label it as Tantra, and some people might go, oh, that's this or it's that. But Tantra basically means a weaving within. And predominantly, it's the spirituality and the sexuality being woven in as being a sacred union that can be experienced in the human body. I mean, we know with orgasm that there is this sense that we get taken out of our body, we experience something otherworldly, and then we land back in again. Sometimes it's a 2 second sneeze, but other times
Mhm.
it can last for a little bit longer. And that can be, by definition, the physical life force, sexual, sensual energy, which is one in the same. Our sexual energy, we came from a sexual energy. So our life force was created on through our reproductive organs, which is sexual energy.
Mm,
And this is where I like to bring it in together, but it's also very mystical. It's mysterious. It's beyond the brain. There is something bigger and greater that we've got access to in the spirit cradle, the soul cradle, to bring souls into a human experience. And so Tantra for me, weaving that into the fertility aspect is twofold, maybe threefold. It is the union of spiritual greatness into our physicality and our sexual life force being part of our spiritual nature. It's a superhighway. It is not broken off, but it is fully connected to all that there is. And when we're able to tap into that mystery and the majestic nature of ourselves as spiritual souls in this human form, not only are we conscious humans, we then get into conscious relating, and then we get into conscious parenting. And because we as parents are our first intimacy coaches for these newborn babies that need primary needs, not just to be fed and clothed and warmed, but there's primary needs until the age of 5. If we can open up and be more connected to ourselves and our needs, that's the gateway of then teaching that into our next generation. It's the evolution. We've got a strong evolving sense of wanting to create so we can birth a
mm,
continual world. And so that's where I feel like it's all woven in all together. There is something deeper and greater that is at play here of a great magnitude that then draws new life into our body and births through us.
mm. And when you work with women who are trying to conceive, so you mentioned that, conception, both conception and tantra, are about working with this sort of sexual life force. Do you
Mm.
see common patterns in women's in that sexual life force and women who are having trouble conceiving?
I find that over time with delayed fertility, there is a damping of the sexual energy. There is a losing of the trust in the body. There is the mind gargoyles that come in and start to have a play and take over the brain power, and the body can feel like it's starting to shut down.
Mm,
So I do hear things like, well, what's the point of having sex and intimacy? We're just going to go and do IVF. And in all the years that I've been doing this work, this is a sentence that gets bookended now. What's the point of having sex? I'm just going to go and do IVF.
mm,
And so there is a divorce, there's a fracture. We can do IVF, but it doesn't mean that we let go of our intimacy. It doesn't mean that we let go of our sexuality. It doesn't mean that we let go of our magnetic life force. That will help enhance the treatments. It'll
mm,
help enhance your process of going through assisted reproductive therapies, IVF, natural fertility.
mm,
That's my it's my belief, but it's also what I see in our work, in our professional arena.
mm. It reminds me of when me and my partner started fertility treatment. I wasn't happy that we were starting treatment, but the one thing I was happy about is that it meant we got to take the whole baby making process out of the bedroom because it was so disastrous for the intimacy between us. It really felt like, okay, now we can finally start working on that intimacy again because we take that more instrumental, goal focused way of lovemaking out of the
Mm,
equation.
mm,
Um, and I guess that's something that a lot of women recognize as a baby making sex. It really harms your sex life. So, what would you suggest for anyone who's struggling with that? How do you start to connect to your partner again?
mm. I love this question. I love what you're asking. Uh, First, I would say it takes two of you. It's the responsibility of both of you, and that's where we need honest communication, and we need to be able to bring it forward in the communication, to be able to sit with one another, eye to eye gaze, heart to heart. Now, this is a practice that we do regularly uh, when I work with couples, and even when I work with women on their own that are single, going on their journey on their own.
Mm,
It's like I become the surrogate. So when we do the eye gazing, we do the eye gazing together, whether it's on a computer or whether it's face to face. And there's a heart articulation practice that takes place where the frequency we start to drop into the body. We also need to think and write down about what it is in intimacy that we enjoy and find that playground again. So, an example that I have for you is I did this practice a few years ago with a couple. They were coming back for the second time to have their child with me. The first time I met them actually when I was in Monash, when I was working in the IVF clinic. And the woman had a really, really tough time getting pregnant. This was before I'd even started my program. She was on IVF for quite a while.
mm,
So in that 6 months, she got pregnant, but they weren't the healthiest of individuals when they did get pregnant. And she had pregnancy complications and also had quite a traumatic birth of her son.
mm,
But because we did some work together, she said, before I am going to get pregnant again, I'm going to do preconception planning and training with you.
mm,
And so we went on a journey, which was 5 months in total because she fell pregnant. But when I was speaking with her husband and we were talking about the intimacy piece, I find out from both couples what they find is top level intimacy physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And then we also have to recognize that not one person can meet everything. So if your partner's not going to meet you entirely in the emotional intimacy, have a good circle of friendships, join a fertility circle, join your program of fertility support, join my program of fertility support, get the support. Don't take it against your partner that, oh, you don't understand me, you can't support me, so then I'm not going to have sex with you. We've got to be able to go and bring it in. It takes a village to conceive a child these days. It truly, truly does. The other thing is spiritual intimacy. You might have a layer of faith that is just for you. So let that be. With this particular couple, when I started talking to them, the husband said to me, I loved it when my wife, she used to have a shower every night. She'd have freshly washed hair, would jump into bed. It would be skin to skin contact. And that was true intimacy for him. He loved it. He adored it. But when they were going through their conceiving difficulties, the wife started showering earlier in the day and she started covering up with her PJs. She just wanted to feel more insular within herself, not knowing that that was the intimacy dialogue that her husband truly wanted, was skin to skin and freshly washed, smelling her hair in bed. And it was a big aha moment. And so then we had more of those aha moments. So then we started to open up the pleasure dome again, started to open up that smorgasbord. So then it wasn't just about sex for conception. And I love to talk to people about the fertility rites that around the world have been taking place for eons. Like, there is a particular way and different ways that we can make love during our ovulation period and increase the magnetism in our body to make the polarity of the masculine and the feminine feel more stronger. And so I always say, as a general rule, make love and intimacy for fun when you're not ovulating. Then go in and then do more of the baby making sex. But don't just do the baby making sex. There is skin to skin contact. There is so much that we can play with our face, our mouth, our food, our silks, our textures. Like, bring that layer of exploration. And this is what starts to enliven and tingle the body. And this is where the magic is. Can I talk about and do a practice where we can frame a practice for our listeners called magnetic hands, and actually how easy it is purely through the hands as an exercise to magnetize the body? This can be the framework of magnetizing the rest of the organs in your own body, and then the magnetic field that we can have between yourself and your partner's body. So that's the real, like, magnets, electromagnetic field, just like cervical fluid is electromagnetically charged, seminal fluid is electromagnetically charged. It's got a charge to it. And so when the two fluids come together, that's the polarity. That's what allows the semen through the seminal fluid to be taken up and magnetized through the cervical fluid into the vagina and into the uterus. So we are electromagnetic beings. So shall I practice? All right, great. So if you're driving, just listen to the practice. Try not to do it until you can find yourself in a safe place to be able to do it. But for people that do have the opportunity to join, you can just follow my lead. So we take our hands and we just give them a nice big rub and getting lots and lots of heat in the hands. So you might hear it through the voice. And then we shake the hands, just give them a good shake. And this way we're getting lots of blood flow and oxygen. And then start to bring the hands together, but keep the hands cupped, but don't touch the hands. If the hands touch, they will earth themselves, just like plugs in a wall. Yeah, electromagnetic plugs, the blues, the greens, the reds. And just notice what you're feeling in your hands. And if you're not feeling much, you can do the practice again. And just be curious. Now, this field, it might feel like tingling in the hands. It might feel like there's a drawing towards or a pulling apart. This is part of our auric field. And what we've done is basically feeling this electromagnetic field that is inside our body and outside our body. And in the arts of Tantra, we can also call this the positive and the negative polarity. And it's also referred to as the masculine and the feminine. And it's not necessarily, I've got one male hand and a female hand, but the masculine and the feminine is also the cooling currents of energy that run through our body and the warm currents of energy that run through our body and all our organs. And so our whole bodies become this magnetic field for ourselves before we even get intimate with our partner. And so imagine feeling this just as we rubbed our hands together and had that magnetic field. Who's experienced this when you're falling in love? Or when you have this anticipation of your first kiss? Or being touched and you feel like your whole body is effervescent? And then you come into sexual relating and then orgasmic relating. And again, this is what we experienced with the hands, the magnetic hands, is actually what we experience through our sensual and our sexual energy. And this is what's possible when we can do these practices and build on these practices by ourselves as well as in our partnership. So I hope that explains one way that we can work with this pleasure dome and in the relationship dynamics of igniting our intimacy.
No, I was just going to say, like, when I started focusing on that energy between my hands, it did indeed remind me of, like, when I was 15, maybe my first time with just kissing a guy. Yeah, that anticipation, that tension, the sexual tension. Yeah. It's so nice that you can really connect to that just by rubbing your hands together. And then would you take that energy into, is that sort of the starting point of getting tantric?
Yeah.
Rubbing your hands and then taking that energy with you to your partner, to your body.
Yeah, absolutely. They say we work with three main keys, and that is breath, sound, and movement. And so we're always breathing. And the intensity of our breath changes. Like when we're asleep, we could have a little baby's breath. But when we're in full lovemaking, our breath is hot and heavy and everything in between. And the same thing with sound. Sound helps move energy through our body. And so it's really important. And I find that when I am working and doing intimacy coaching with people, I try and get them to use their sound. And there are some people that don't like making sound, especially during sex, etc. But by making sound, it helps move the energy through the body. Just like when we're birthing, for those that have birthed, in our listeners that have been pregnant, going for another child, the birthing process allows for a lot of sound. It helps move and open the body. And so we've got breath, sound, and movement. And when we're able to move the body in particular ways and move and go with the sensations of the body and not be so linear, but just be very, very curious in where is the trickle, where's the sensation, where's the pounding, where's the heat, we're able to open up into more of a sensory experience.
Mm.
More of us is online.
Mm.
Mm.
Or
Mm.
aliveness.
More aliveness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
And what would you say to someone who, with all of the fertility challenges, who has developed a bit of a distorted relationship with their bodies? So maybe very instrumental. It's just, the body's just there to get pregnant, or maybe after loss or, difficult conditions, you can also develop some sort of hatred really towards your body. How do you
Mm.
start connecting from that place of love again to your body?
Mm. I would say that if a woman has been in this situation and hasn't been able to get out of it by themselves, to please reach out.
Mm.
There is you, there is me, there are ways to midwife you through.
Mm.
There are somatic practices that we can do, and it's about what you touched on earlier with the calming of the nervous system,
Mm.
is that we can get into our ventral nervous system, which is the calm response. It's the front of the body being relaxed. It's the stomach being relaxed. It's the pelvic bowl being relaxed. We're going to be able to move any of that trauma, because IVF and a lot of loss and failed treatments can lead to medical trauma. And it is a real thing. It's a real thing. And it can be moved through your body. And what I would suggest, like through breath work, through somatic practices, we get the body back into a calm response. And the brain can start to know that it's had these past experiences, but those past experiences are not going to hijack your next experience. I mean, that's what's important, because what we want to try and do is clear the cache,
Mm.
is a word that I would use, is like clear some of that programming. So this next pregnancy that takes place is not needing to deal with the backlog.
Mm.
Because what I can find with clients that come to see me is they've got trauma, whether it's from childhood trauma, medical trauma, past relationships, losing trust in their body. And they'll say, oh, when I'm pregnant, I'm going to be ecstatic. I won't need to worry. But
Mm.
that's a carryover.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
even prior, just moments prior to us coming onto this phone call, I am blessed enough to be supporting a woman who is now pregnant and far further along in her pregnancy. But because of the work that we did, she has had a couple of miscarriages, and now she's into her 10th week. But I'm offering one-on-one meditation because of the work that I've done with her and her partner. My voice has become a safe anchor.
Mm-hmm.
So because of the work that we've done, now that this pregnancy is progressing, we catch up weekly and I do a guided meditation and talk about how she's feeling. So we're trying not to get into the fear mongering that this pregnancy is different.
Mm-hmm.
And so then she's getting to enjoy the pregnancy as opposed to carrying the fear forward, because then it might tip into, I'm going to be so scared about what my birth is going to be like. And then we're scared about how we're going to be raising our children.
Mm.
And so I don't want women to suffer unnecessarily, my friend.
Mm. It
Mm.
reminds me of something you said earlier, that doing this work you know, it sets you up for conscious conception, then
Mm.
conscious labor, conscious parenthood. And it's something I really recognize from my own journey where um, somewhere midway on my own fertility journey, I started to train to become a Tantra teacher, just like yourself.
Mm.
Um, and then I realized, and that's something I want to discuss with you as well, I realized that I could bring these principles with me into my clinic as well. That if, you know, I was developing this whole new relationship with my body, but that also affected how I was other people going to, or how I was going to have other people touch my body. And then I even got a tantric midwife once I finally got pregnant because I realized I wanted my birth process to also align with those principles of being really present um and with, you know, everything done with consent. And now that I'm a mother, I see I'm bringing those same principles into motherhood. And I even got a nanny who's also a tantric body worker, so that she's also taught.
Incredible.
And
I
I did it,
love it.
yeah, and it wasn't on purpose. It just I found her and I realized that this fits because again, she's bringing those principles with her into the way that she takes care of my kids now. You know, with
Love
attention, with consent, with just a very soft,
it.
like
Mm.
no authority play. Yeah. So
Mm.
I just,
Because
yeah.
it's not, yeah, I love what you're saying there. And this is a really important point to bring home to our listeners, that the word tantra does not mean sex.
Mm,
It does not mean a type of sex that is, and it's not, it's a way of life. It's bringing the sacredness into the everyday.
mm,
It's living a fuller experience, human experience through our senses. And preconception is a rite of passage. It's a
mm,
fertility rite of passage, just as much as pregnancy is, just as much as birth is and beyond. The preconception phase is a shape-shifting phase of mattress sense.
mm,
It makes a person, and mattress sense being the maternal aspect, but
mm.
it starts to shape shift you at the cellular level to prepare your body and mind and spirit for new life to grow inside you and through you.
Yeah.
That's magnificent.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever shared about my midwife here on the podcast because it's, you know, giving birth is a bit of a different topic.
Mm.
But like the way I found her, I read a story where she was working with a client who was giving birth and the birth stalled. And then she did an internal, not an exam, but sort of she did an internal massage where they came upon a trauma point in that woman's cervix. And so there was some trauma there. They worked through it. So the woman was crying, releasing the trauma, and then the birth could continue and the baby was out in like 5 minutes after. And I feel that's the beauty of this work. It's about inviting the body to open, be it for birth or for conception. It's sometimes difficult to explain how deep that trauma can affect every process in your body until you start working with it and you see this is actually so key that we work with this and address this. And maybe we don't understand it, but it is there.
And that's beautiful with what you were saying. To reiterate that, is that through the birthing phase, where there was sound, in the crying and the releasing and the movement, that is shifting it out of the cells, the empty spaces in the body, the fascia, where the trauma gets trapped in the
Mm,
body.
hmm
Um, and there are ways of moving that through somatically. Absolutely.
mm.
Mm. Mm.
And so, like I said, I also wanted to talk to you about how to bring these principles into the treatment room or into your
Mm.
clinic, or maybe
Mm.
even into like forced baby making sex. So you have, you know, it's late, you just came home from work, you know that you're ovulating, your partner, you have to get up early, so you have 20 minutes. So how under all of these circumstances can you still bring these principles in and really make sure
Mm.
you're not damaging your body, or maybe if there's some damage that's been done, how do you address that?
Yeah, sure. The the advice that I have is we've got to keep the hot plate on warm all the time. So if you're in a couple relationship, don't just stop and start. You're being kind to each other. If you're walking up the hallway, brush your partner's hand over their back. So when there is touch and connection, it means that it just doesn't feel like it's so forced when it's time to get into the act and into the bedroom. If you're in the kitchen, touch. If you're on the couch, have a cup of tea, touch, eye gaze. I always find it's beautiful to turn it into a ritual experience as well. So if you can eye gaze and just look at each other, breathe together, dropping into your heart space, dropping into the back of the body. It just takes a few minutes, but that means that we've got that connection as opposed to your eyes are already closed, even though it's daylight, and you're already switching off from the experience. So it's like you're disconnecting from the waist up, and you're just making things happen from the waist down. So being connected to yourself is really important. So then when you are in that moment of it's time for baby making, just spend a minute or two eye gazing, breathing in and out at the same time. Put a hand on each other's heart and just we're doing this. This may be it. There's a practice that I have in my space called womb whispering. And if people sign up for my Fertile Ready in 6-day free course, which we can talk about later, they can reach out. They'll have me, they can contact me, and I can actually take them through that as well. There are some ritual things that we can do that goes beyond just the sex. We turn it into something. We have the entree and the dessert as well, not just the come on, let's get into it and let's get out of it. Allowing yourself to be. If you're needing more touch, your partner might be touching you. That's two hands. You've also got two hands. Touch your body as well. The more that you stimulate more of your skin, your breasts are part of your reproductive space. And so if you can play with your breasts, if you can play with the inside of your mouth, you're going to be able to enliven and open up the lights of the house. Yeah, ding, 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 ding. So that means that you're going to have more access and availability to the juiciness in the lovemaking. And as much as you can, just relax and enjoy whatever you can. I hope that helps.
Definitely. And for someone who's in treatment, because you mentioned these procedures can be very invasive. I've had someone mention it on the podcast before as well. It can, even for the body, it can feel like a violation, really. So
yeah.
How do you prepare? How do you?
Yeah, I keep it really soft. I say to my clients all the time, I take them through. I've got a meditation. It's called the IVF meditation, where I literally take them through where they can use it for egg harvesting or implantation, where there is sacredness, even because even through the process of IVF, there is penetration. Let's think about it. There's penetration. Yes, you're under, you're not going to feel it, but you know that there is penetration. So everything is sacred. These people, the anesthetists, the nurses, the doctors, the hematologists, they're all spirit beings in a human body here being part of your village. So if we can look at them and treat them as such, that they are spirit beings, that they are working in collaboration with your spirit baby to make this happen, how would that feel?
Mm.
Knowing. And so if you're going to go in for for embryo implantation, what can you do for yourself that feels sensual, sexual, like you've just made love?
Mm-hmm.
You may not make love, but can you give yourself and gift yourself to bridge the gap and say to yourself, well, this is what I would do, because it's happening outside of your body, but there's going to be a union and a weaving inside your body. It's just time that's different.
Mm-hmm.
There's just an extension of time. So can this be a 24-hour lovemaking period
Mm-hmm.
from when you start? Can you wear your favorite knickers? Can you dance? Can you look in the mirror? Can you kiss yourself in the mirror? Can you anything that you can do to be playful, sensual? And I know it can be hard for people that have been on this journey, and it can feel like there's been a big disconnect. But slowly, slowly, if that's you, I'm just going to urge you to just lean in just a little bit closer, and then a little bit closer again.
Mm-hmm.
We don't force it. We don't force anything. But can you wear your favorite knickers? Can you get sensual? Can you say to yourself that this is a 24-hour lovemaking experience from when you start with your partner to when you are going to be impregnated with your embryo?
Mm-hmm.
Like, turn it into a story for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would suggest.
I love that. I've shared this on
Mm.
the podcast before, but I think that's part of what my Tantra training did for me is I really turned those transfers into rituals and tried to see how can I turn this into a sacred day for me. And for me, it meant like putting on music during the procedure and asking the doctors not to talk, which had a great effect on the room. They told me afterwards, like, oh, this was special. We felt so calm ourselves as well. So
Mm.
um,
Mm.
there's a lot that's possible, but
Mm.
it takes courage also to say, I am allowed to do things differently. I'm allowed to do things my own way. I'm allowed to make myself feel good. Yeah.
Yeah, it's part of like your fertility plan, your conception plan, your birth plan, all of
Mm,
it. Yeah,
true. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I haven't shared you don't know this story yet, but I'm about to share it with you and the rest
Mm,
of the listeners. But I started my Tantra training when I was about 43. So that was 11 years ago. And I had been divorced for quite a while, and I had teenage children. They were older teenagers. And so while I did my intensive training, I was on my own. I wasn't in a relationship, like a live-in partner relationship. And we all had to do a research assignment, and mine was on fertility. It was really strong for me. It was Tantra for fertility. So I ended up creating a program. And I said earlier, I'm a scientist by education.
mm,
So I did a hypothesis, I did a method, like everyone else that was there. Some were hippies, etc. And they're just like,
mhm.
dude, but it's just the way that my mind worked, right?
Yeah.
So I actually did a whole research paper, and I took people onto a journey. So first of all, I interviewed a lot of people about what is conscious conception for them. So I actually got a whole heap of anecdotal data of what is conscious conception. And then I also had my program that I took people through. And I started it during the training, but then even up until I finished the training and thereafter, everyone got pregnant. Eventually, everyone got pregnant, which was amazing. But what I also didn't realize is the year after that, I got into a relationship. Now, I was also writing my book, Consciously Conceive Your Baby,
Mm,
which had, so this was 10 years ago, right?
mm,
11 years. Um, yeah, 2013. but prior to that, I was also clearly working for the IVF clinic. So I had a lot of clients and a lot of research that I was wanting to compile into a book. So I was living and breathing Tantra, fertility, intimacy, sensuality, and embodiment. I got together with my partner. I was not planning on having a child. And he was Tantra by nature as well. So
Mm,
we got into a tantric relationship. I fell pregnant naturally at 45.
mm,
So I was blown away.
mm.
I'm like, oh, this was supposed to be all the anecdotal data for my clients. But I thought I was perimenopausal. I thought
Mm,
whatever I was going through was like, oh, this is significant. And
mhm,
I could feel the spirit wanting to come through. It felt different to my other two children because they were a lot older. So my body was like, oh, this isn't like giving birth in my 20s.
mm,
Is this what it feels like? I'm going through a birthing process, but for perimenopause.
mm,
But it's a spirit that had a very, very strong connection that would actually come into our body and leave our body and
mm,
leave my body. And it was very, very palatable. It's like she would come and then she would go. And I'm like, whoa,
mm.
are you a
What's going
spirit
on?
baby come through?
Yeah.
Yes, it's very, very palatable. So, and this is the beauty. She helped teach me the next layer of conscious conception that was a lot stronger than what I ever had in my other two pregnancies in
Mm.
my 20s. Yeah.
Wow,
Mm.
that's so beautiful. I didn't know that when we started this
Mm.
interview. So she's
The,
10 years old now?
no, the pregnancy unfortunately didn't eventuate,
Mm,
but she also taught me about pregnancy loss.
mm,
So she's an incredible, she really did shapeshift me in the next phase of of my fertility rights because I
mm,
hadn't experienced a pregnancy loss. I hadn't experienced that layer of connection.
mm,
So yeah, it really helped define me and
mm,
helps me do the work that I do today with grief and loss, just like you beautifully shared with your listeners on the episode 87
mm,
on the 5 phases of pregnancy loss. That's a beautiful, beautiful
mm.
podcast to listen to.
Thank you. And is it something
Mm.
you recognize from your own process?
Yeah, but I love the way that you broke it down to being the physical process of miscarrying, and then it's the physical loss. And then we've got the emotional loss and aspect and the reconciliation that takes place.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
so, so important.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm, mm.
Well, thank you for sharing your story. And
Mm.
thank you also for, I think, a beautiful interview. I feel like we were guided by a higher power.
I do too.
What would
Yeah.
be your general message for anyone who's dealing with fertility issues and or pregnancy loss, just to round up the conversation?
Yes. You birthed yourself into this world and you have got the blueprint to birth through yet again another soul that's waiting in the wings. There is a path forward for most of the listeners. We have a power navel and a spiritual umbilicus. And there is a force that wants to come through you, that wants to birth into this world. We're shape-shifting. We're evolutionary in nature. You are choosing this spiritual path of parenthood. And I just want you to feel that light not be dim, but be really strong. That's in your heart and that's also in your womb space. Like dial up the dimmer switch do whatever you can to dial it up. And it is lifestyle choices. We are living in a world where there is a lot more stress to put food on the table and have a roof over our heads, but there is a greater force at play.
Mm.
And just find the ways to enjoy yourself again, have the faith, the honeymoon effect through your body, through your partner's body, and just open up to keep staying open to the mystery of all creation that is around you and inside of you.
Something is coming through me as you say this, is that, and when it feels uncomfortable, you know that you're on the right path.
Ooh.
Because you're doing
Yes.
something new. You're doing something in a new way. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again for a beautiful conversation. Where can people find out more about you, your work, your book, your programs?
A lot of my fertility resources are on my website called Synergy Fertility Health Studio. And in there, you've got a choice. You've got the opportunity to do a 6-day fertile ready in 6-day free course, where I also get you to fill out a menstrual health pulse check form, and you can speak to me directly about how regulating your menstrual health is a key component to your fertility markers. I get you to read your period, your cycles, and what you could do with herbal medicine and lifestyle choices to bring your cycle into the most optimum cycle for conception. So that's Synergy Fertility Health Studio. I also have another website, which is helenzee.com. And that was the original one that I set up that has the intimacy work on there as well. In the show notes, we can put my book, which is Consciously Conceive Your Baby, The Secrets to Boosting Your Fertility and Getting Pregnant. And in that book, there's 3 sections. There's the first section's dedicated on physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual preparation. The second section is Sacred Sex for Fertility, where I actually talk about the fertility, Tantra, body magnetism practices that both men and women can do to enliven your sexual prowess. And the third section of the book is conscious parenting. And that's where I talk about all children worldwide have 5 core needs that we need to know how to foster that in the first 5 years of their life. And if we have experienced any trauma or grievances in our own upbringing, in our past relationships, or there's some ancestral emotional mental blocks in our fertility journey, I speak about how to resource yourself through that. And so that's a beautiful segue into conscious parenting, because it's so much about conscious parenting as much as it is about the fertility process.
I'll put everything in the show notes, your website, the 6-day program, the book.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming on the show. I should have mentioned this at the start of the interview to the listeners, but I'm doing a giveaway this month because I need some more reviews on Apple or on Spotify. So if you give the show 5 stars on Spotify or write me a review on Apple, send me a screenshot either here on my email or on Instagram. I'm giving away 1 free one-on-one session this month. So you can send in your screenshot before the end of June, and I will privately announce the winner on July 1st. So I won't put your name on social media. I know this is a private matter of infertility, but I'll make sure that you know you won. So thanks to the listeners for tuning in this week. If you have any questions, you can find me on Instagram at thatfertilefeeling or email me at francoise@thatfertilefeeling.com. I always love to hear from you and always get back to you, and I hope to see you back next week. Bye bye.